I'm a pretty healthy 42-year-old, or so I thought. I recently got my biomarkers checked, and my test results revealed a pretty surprising risk for heart disease. I exercise regularly, I stopped drinking alcohol, typically get 8 hours of sleep every night. I track what I eat. I felt like I was doing all the right things. Despite what I thought was a pretty healthy lifestyle, I was pretty surprised to learn that I was at significant risk for heart disease. A very specific biomarker that I tested, Lipoprotein A, puts me at a much higher risk than the average person. It most likely runs in my family. I think my dad had it, his grandfather had it based on their health history, and now I have it. And since it's genetic, lifestyle changes won't help as much. There's no cure, there's no drug I can take to fix the problem. This wasn't really something I expected to deal with in my early 40s, and I went through all of the motions. I was in denial, I was angry, I was sad. But after a few months, I decided to figure out a plan. This video essay was a very long time in the making. Over the past year, I documented my journey from the initial diagnosis to the initial treatment. I waited to compare all of my test results to my latest numbers. I'll share all of my biomarker data and my long-term plans. I feel pretty fortunate to have learned this at my age. I hope anyone watching this is getting tested and beginning early prevention against heart disease. This is not just an old people problem. This is something that affects young people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s as well. The biggest lesson that I've learned is that heart disease is completely preventable, but early detection and prompt action are crucial. Disclaimer, I am not a doctor. I am not an expert. I'm just some random guy who decided to look into heart disease for himself. I'm sharing what I learned along my journey. If you have any questions, please consult a medical professional. To give a little bit of context and background, for 15 years, I led a pretty high-stress, fast-paced lifestyle as a tech startup founder. Low odds of success bred constant stress. Because work was my top priority, I deprioritized my health, which eventually caught up with me. When I turned 40, I stepped away from the world of startups and went on a sabbatical. I decided to set a decade goal to make my biological age a decade younger and my mental age a decade wiser. To do this, I implemented several lifestyle changes. I started to exercise more. I started to eat healthier, get better sleep. I also quit alcohol during this time. I also started seeing a therapist to figure out my but I was really curious about my health, so I signed up for a longevity clinic called Bionic. There, I had my biomarker checked, including my lifespan, which is how long we live, and health span, which is how long we will be healthy. My goal was to live as long as possible and be as healthy as possible. But I wanted to learn more about my risks for the four horsemen: heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease such as Alzheimer's, and type 2 diabetes. And that's when I received the surprising news I have very high risk for heart disease. My test results were pretty mixed. We checked my cholesterol levels and other biomarkers that are not typically checked for, but are strongly linked to heart disease risk. And I would say my overall risk assessment falls somewhere between moderate to high. My total cholesterol was 201, which is borderline high. My LDL was around 129. My HDL was around 61, which is pretty good. My VLD was around 11, and my triglycerides were around 61. My ApoB was 93, which was borderline high. And my lipoprotein A, also known as LP little a, was 124.6, which was very high. I also got a CT calcium score, which was around 11, which puts me at moderate risk. The combination of a high LDL, high ApoB, and very high LP little a was very concerning. This combination leads to plaque formation and blood clots. In other words, I have a perfect storm of conditions to promote atherosclerosis, which is the narrowing and hardening of the arteries, which basically significantly increases my risk of heart attacks and strokes. I had no idea what any of this stuff means, so what I'll do now is I'll provide a breakdown of what each of these mean. Your total cholesterol is the measure of all the cholesterol in your blood. High levels can lead to fatty deposits in your blood vessels, which increases the risk of heart disease and stroke. Cholesterol is essential, but too much can clog your arteries. Ideally, it should be below 200 milligrams. LDL, this is bad cholesterol because it can contribute to artery blockages when levels are too high. LDL is kind of like the junk that clogs up your arteries. You ideally want the levels to be below 100 milligrams per deciliter, with less than 70 recommended for high risk patients. Dr. Peter Tia recommends even lower levels, around 30 to 50 milligrams per deciliter for those at very high risk. HDL, this is good cholesterol because it helps remove the excess cholesterol from your bloodstream. Think of HDL as a cleaner that removes excess cholesterol. Higher levels are better, ideally above 60 milligrams per deciliter. VLDL is a type of lipoprotein that carries your triglycerides through your bloodstream. It's another type of quote unquote bad cholesterol, but that can contribute to plaque buildup. Ideally, VLDL levels should be between 2 and 30 milligrams per deciliter. And triglycerides, this is a type of fat in the blood that the body uses for energy, but high levels can contribute to the buildup of plaque in your arteries. Normal levels are below 150 milligrams per deciliter, but Dr. Peter Tia wants the triglyceride to HDL ratio to be 2 to 1 or better, or less than 1 to 1. ApoB is a protein that carries LDL and other potentially harmful lipids. ApoB helps bad cholesterol travel through your body. It's a pretty good indicator of cardiovascular risk. Optimal levels are below 80 milligrams per deciliter, while above 100 is pretty concerning. Dr. Peter Tia's target is to get it down to 30 to 40 milligrams per deciliter for those in their 30s and 40s. A good rule of thumb is that your ApoB target should be about 10 milligrams per deciliter higher than your LDL targets. Lipoprotein little a, or LP little a, is a genetic factor that can increase plaque buildup in your arteries. An optimal level is below 50, while a level above 100 is considered very high risk. And your CT calcium score. This shows how much calcium is in your heart's arteries. It indicates the extent of coronary disease. At younger ages, a score of 0 is ideal, while above 100 is generally considered high risk. Around the same time, I also got a DEXA scan to measure my body fat, my lean muscle, and bone density. I thought I was in shape. I didn't think I was too overweight, but the results were pretty unexpected. My total body fat percentage was 26.6%. But most concerning was my fat distribution. A lot of it was in my abdominal area compared to my hips and thighs. And this type of fat distribution is associated with greater metabolic and cardiovascular risk. It also revealed concerning levels of visceral fat. I have about 1.5 pounds of fat surrounding my abdomen and organs, and ideally visceral fat should be less than 1 pound, as it's the most harmful fat linked to plaque, diabetes, and high blood pressure. So my DEXA results, my lipid panel, my other biomarker showed my cardiovascular risk. And despite being pretty healthy or having a healthy lifestyle, I was facing pretty significant health challenges. I knew that it required immediate attention. The results were pretty overwhelming, I'm not going to lie. On one hand, I'm glad that I found out before I had a stroke or heart attack. On the other hand, it wasn't really something I expected to deal with my age. I'm 42 now, but I learned about this when I was 40 or 41. But my test results revealed that I had the arteries of someone a decade or two older. And it wasn't a really good start to my decade goal. And navigating this journey, I experienced a roller coaster of emotions. I was in denial. I avoided it for a few months. I was scared, but I eventually came around and accepted reality. And that's when I started to dig deeper to educate myself and determine what my next steps would be. I knew I needed to put together a plan to address these risks. This would involve not only continuing my healthy habits, but also exploring what medicine I could take to manage my cholesterol levels and reduce my risk of heart disease. Heart disease, despite being the leading cause of death globally, is largely preventable with early intervention. It accounts for an estimated 30% of all deaths worldwide, with someone in the US having a heart attack every 40 seconds. But the most common form of heart disease is coronary artery disease, which is caused by the buildup of plaque, which is a combination of fat, cholesterol, and other substances in the arteries. Once plaque has developed in the arteries, it can't be entirely reversed, but its progression can be slowed or stabilized. But fortunately, modern medicine has provided us with different tools to basically prevent and manage heart disease. Regular exercise, healthy diet, stress management. By detecting and addressing potential issues pretty early, we can prevent the progression and reduce the likelihood of a heart attack or stroke. Dr. Peter Attia believes that we have the power to remove it from the top 10 leading causes of death, but it starts with a very proactive approach to our health. All the tension about lipoprotein a started with a 2018 New York Times article titled, "A Heart Risk Factor Even Doctors Know Little About." The article highlighted that while doctors test for other lipoproteins like HDL and LDL cholesterol, very few test for LPA, even though high levels can triple the risk of having a heart attack or stroke at any age. Lp(a) is similar to LDL, the bad cholesterol, but it has an extra protein attached called ApoA, which increases the risk of blood clots and plaque buildup in arteries, which makes Lp(a) more dangerous and harder to clear from the bloodstream. It's like having extra traffic on the roads, which sometimes could lead to accidents. This is similar to having blockages in your arteries. What makes lipoprotein A concerning is that it's largely determined by genetics, meaning you inherit it from your parents. It's not something you can control through lifestyle changes like diet or exercise or getting enough sleep. Approximately 20 to 30% of people have elevated Lp(a) levels, which start between 30 to 50 milligrams per deciliter. Your risk of having a heart attack or stroke increases with high levels of Lp(a) as well. And this graph illustrates how elevated levels significantly raise your risk over time compared to normal levels. My levels were in the 80th to the 95th percentile, which puts me at very high risk. While I can continue to lower my ApoB through lifestyle changes, I will most likely need medication to bring my LPA score down. And this realization led me to explore treatment options, including the approach recommended by Dr. Peter Attia, which is eradicate ApoB to the level a child has with a target of 30 to 40 milligrams per deciliter. And then number 2 is to use PCSK9 inhibitors to reduce Lp(a), which can lower levels by an average of 30%. There are some promising new therapies in development for those with high lipoprotein A levels. And these new drugs look highly effective. They're in clinical trials now, and they can lower your LPA levels ranging anywhere from 65 to 98%. There's also gene editing therapies, which are being developed to turn off the LPA gene permanently in the liver, which potentially offers a one-time treatment to reduce Lp(a) levels. These advancements give me hope that there will be some more effective treatments in the future, but for now, I need to focus on what my options were to manage my heart disease risk. The general rule of thumb to manage heart disease is to keep your LDL and ApoB levels as low as possible for as long as possible. And from my research, treatment for heart disease risk typically falls into two major categories. The first being lifestyle changes and medication. As far as lifestyle changes, it's what you would expect. The first being diet. Following Michael Pollan's advice, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. The Mediterranean diet, which emphasizes plant-based foods, healthy fats, and to limit processed foods is often recommended. Focus on consuming a variety of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy fats. Typically what you would expect from a well-balanced, healthy diet. Number 2 is to exercise, particularly to combine strength training to increase your lean muscle mass and cardio training to increase your VO2 max. Ideally, you're doing zone 2 training, which can widen and maintain the elasticity of your arteries, which can improve your blood flow. Sleep, aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night. This is actual sleep, not just time in bed. About 25% of that in deep sleep and 25% in REM sleep. And then stress management. So start practicing meditation, dabbling in new hobbies, developing ways to manage your stress levels, and then vices, which is quit smoking and reduce or eliminate alcohol consumption. The second category is around medicine, and it really falls into two buckets. The first bucket being statins. These are drugs that effectively lower your ApoB concentrations and reduce your overall risk of heart disease. They work by one, slowing down your cholesterol production in your liver, and two, helping the liver remove more cholesterol from the blood. While it's widely prescribed and generally safe, there are some side effects such as muscle pain, liver damage, increased blood sugar levels, but they are not as effective in reducing Lp(a) levels. Critics argue that the benefits of statin are marginal and do not justify their widespread use. There's also concerns about the lack of transparency in clinical trial data, which may be biased towards showing more positive results. The second bucket for medicine is PCSK9 inhibitors. This is a newer type of medication which can lower your LDL cholesterol by about 50% and reduce Lp(a) by 20 to 30. These inhibitors work by blocking the action of PCSK9, which is a protein that reduces the liver's ability to remove LDL from the blood. By inhibiting PCSK9, these drugs allow more LDL receptors to remain active in your liver cells, which increases your LDL cholesterol removal from the bloodstream. They're often prescribed when statins alone are inefficient or not well tolerated. But these inhibitors have some drawbacks, the first being the cost. Annual treatment can range anywhere from $5,000 to $12,000, and many insurance plans don't cover this medication. They're given via injection every 2 to 4 weeks, which may be inconvenient for some patients. I personally don't mind it because I would rather take an injection every few weeks versus taking a pill every single day. And it's unknown what the long-term effects are of these inhibitors because it's so new. What I realized is that it was going to be really hard for me to get to these low levels without taking some type of medication, whether it was a statin or this inhibitor. I would have to take medicine and make some lifestyle changes in order for my numbers to go down. But before I go into my tactical plan, I want to share some mindset shifts I had to make throughout this entire process. The first one is facing health challenges as we age is inevitable. While my test results were really tough to hear, I realized that I shouldn't get too discouraged by my test results. It's something that's going to happen. It's just part of life. Instead, what I decided to do was to focus on what I can control, make the best possible decisions and choices to take care of my own health. Number two, medicine can be beneficial. I usually don't take any medication, the type of person that won't even take a Tylenol for a headache. I used to view medicine as a failure to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Now I understand that medication can be an important tool in managing your health and prevent even more serious complications down the road. Number three was to pick the sustainable approach. Knowing my personality, I know that making huge lifestyle changes, such as adopting a fully vegan diet, was not really going to be sustainable for me in the long run. Instead, I decided to focus on making small, gradual changes that can eventually become part of my habits over time. And after receiving these test results, consulting with friends who went through something similar, many different doctors, I developed a two-pronged approach to manage my heart disease risks. So the first one being lifestyle. I'll continue my healthy diet. I'll exercise regularly. I'll prioritize my sleep, manage stress, do all the right things. And continue with strength training, switch to mostly vegetarian or plant-based diet, around 80% of what I eat, and started to do zone 2 running. And then the second was what medication would I take? And after researching everything, I decided to start with the PCSK9 inhibitor. I wanted to see if it could lower my ApoB and reduce my Lp(a). While statins alone doesn't really lower Lp(a), so I wanted to try the inhibitor instead. My ongoing plan is to continue taking the PCSK9 inhibitor until the FDA approves a new drug that specifically targets Lp(a). I decided to get my blood work done roughly every 3 to 6 months. I wanted to take one medication at a time to really assess its effectiveness and then make any necessary adjustments to the plan. 3 months after starting the Repatha treatment, I received my follow-up test results. So one thing I want to note is we switched from LabCorp to Boston Heart for this initial test result, which changed the way Lp(a) was reported. The new lab reported Lp(a) in milligrams per deciliter, so I had to figure out how to convert that. So it's not going to be apples to apples, but it'll be close. But despite all of this, my cholesterol showed some dramatic improvements. My total cholesterol decreased from 201 milligrams per deciliter to 145. My LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, dropped from 129 milligrams per deciliter to 63. My HDL increased from 61 to 71, and my VLD remained stable, moving from around 11 milligrams per deciliter to 10. My ApoB reduced from 93 milligrams per deciliter to 47, and my triglycerides decreased from 61 to 43. My lipoprotein was around 53 milligrams per deciliter, and then I had to convert it. So my lipoprotein A results over time were 124.6 in July of 2023, 95.4 in November of 2023, 114 in June of 2024. So the number did move, so I'm not really sure why that happened. While I had hoped Repatha would work and reduce my lipoprotein A by around 30%, the results have been pretty mixed. But despite all of that, I'm pretty grateful for the improvements in my other cholesterol metrics. My total cholesterol improved by around 28%, primarily driven by a 51% reduction in my LDL. Inhibitor probably accounts for 99% of these improved results. I wasn't really diligent with my supplements or vitamins, so I think if I took those every single day, my scores would improve further. Before I went on Repatha, my cholesterol consistently hovered around 200 milligrams per deciliter. No matter what I did for diet or exercise, it would always just be stuck at that number. And this is probably the first time, maybe ever, that my numbers have actually gone down, or since I've tracked them. I don't really have any side effects with Repatha, so I plan to continue taking it, but the treatment does involve injections every 2 weeks. It costs around $546 per month. I order it through Amazon Pharmacy, and moving forward, I do plan to stay on Repatha. I'm going to retest again in 3 months and explore some new alternative approaches. Upon doing a little bit more research, lipoprotein A levels typically go down after 3 to 6 months of regular use. I've only been on it for 3 months, so we'll see if my Lp(a) levels decrease by 20 to 30% over this period. I'm hopeful that my lipoprotein A scores will decrease further. My goal is to bring the level below 45 milligrams per deciliter. I'll be happy with this, considering that this is genetic and very difficult to move, but I'll continue to keep my LDL levels low. In the long term, my plan is to stay on Repatha until the new medicine that brings my lipoprotein A score down dramatically. My hope is that a treatment will be available within the next 5 years. And just to wrap all of this up, initially I sought a definite answer, a silver bullet, a protocol that would solve all my problems if I followed it to the T. I would ask people for their advice. I would ask them for what they would do if they were in my shoes. But ultimately, this is a decision only I can make based on the available information that I have. And it's better to make an informed decision, learn from it, tweak along the way, and not stay idle. With this plan in place, I'll continue to make adjustments as needed. And managing my heart disease risk is going to be a lifelong process. I understand that, I've accepted it, and I hope that by taking these steps, I can reduce my risk and inspire others to do the same. It's also important to remember that everyone's journey is very different, and what works for one person may not work for another. So please consult with a healthcare provider to figure out what's best for you. Be proactive about your health. It's never too early or too late to start making some positive changes. Every small step can make a difference in the long run. Heart disease is preventable, but only if you get ahead of it. So take charge of your heart health today, get tested, and start your journey towards a healthier